Okay, so what do this thumbnail, and this thumbnail all have in common? Well, they all have a few million views, but also they have underlying psychological principles which make them work. I'm going to teach you a bunch of ways to look at thumbnails that you may have never come across before. Why do we feel a certain way towards a thumbnail? And so in this video, I'm going to give you a bunch of frameworks for thinking about thumbnails, know exactly what viewers look for in a thumbnail, and come away with some insanely useful strategies for making thumbnails that actually work. If you get this right as a YouTuber or YouTube strategist, you'll really increase the views on your videos. We're going to use lots of case studies to show you exactly what I mean. And here is how we'll start. Now, this is Veritasium. He's a really amazing educational YouTuber that talks about physics and science concepts. And he made this video called Clickbait is Unreasonably Effective. In this video, he goes on to describe how he had a video called Strange Applications of the Magnus Effect, which is a basketball that he threw off a dam, which, you know, should be a banger title and banger thumbnail already, but because he titled it Strange Applications of the Magnus Effect, it didn't really do that well. Until someone else re-uploaded that video, and then that video was basketball dropped from dam, got millions of views, and it just did a lot better with that simple title because people want to see that. He said that within a few weeks that video had received tens of millions of views on YouTube. He also noticed that there was another video that he did, which was the Collatz conjecture, which is a very esoteric concept, and people that already know that concept, they probably don't need a video explaining it again. But that didn't really do that well until he changed it to this title, The Simplest Math Problem No One Can Solve. And then it did hella good. Look this is fire, literally. And it did 41 million views in 3 years, which is just like an absolutely insane amount of views. That was talking about the title, but why is the thumbnail important here? Well, the thumbnail is important, and packaging in general is important, because if you have thumbnail A and thumbnail B, and lead to the same video, that same video, without changing anything else about the video, thumbnail A can lead to 100,000 views, and then thumbnail B can lead to 1 million views. Now, I know I've talked about titles in terms of the Veritasium videos just then, but thumbnails obey really the same principle, because ultimately increasing your clickability is going to increase the number of views for your video, and it's something that's very, very high yield, so very, very important to focus on. Hopefully, now that we're on the same page about the packaging being important, which includes the titles, but also includes the thumbnails, I want to talk about what is it that makes a good thumbnail on YouTube. What's something that makes a thumbnail clickable? And I think when you're researching thumbnails, you want to understand a question, which is, what is the critical psychological appeal that a winning thumbnail aims for? If you look at this thumbnail, for example, if your message isn't completely unique, you're banned. Like, this thumbnail has a gun and a dead dude in it. So this is kind of like a psychological appeal of fear and danger. And that's interesting. A lot of storytelling and then a lot of things that we click on are because we want to aid our survival. That survival might be danger aversion. That survival might be, oh, how do I accumulate resources and make a lot of money? It might be something like, how do I find love and how do I go towards procreation? So like a lot of the stuff that we do in terms of reward-seeking behavior as humans relates all to that survival benefit that we get. So here is the fear and danger one. That's a very abstract concept, but you might be wondering, what does survival have to do with shocked reaction thumbnails? I think it's just interesting to see what people are scared by or shocked by, because that might indicate something important as well that, again, could aid our survival. Arguably, you might say that's a bit of a stretch. You might say, look, I'm just interested to see why this person is shocked. Fair enough. But I really believe in this survival theory thing. This is another good thumbnail that's really interesting, because this video has 341,000 views. Pretty good. It's just a guy explaining things on a whiteboard, but it's good because it feels, one, very comprehensive, and then two, it feels like it's going to be a real thumbnail. This is like anti-clickbait in a sense. So you got to try to get towards things that feel like whatever is in the thumbnail is going to be whatever is in the video. I've mentioned this before, but a sense of completeness is also something that's really useful. This video is every level of civilization explained. And it just seems like a video where, you probably never even cared about the idea of levels of civilization before, but if you've got this thing as a whole package, then that's something that would be a very worthwhile investment of 15 minutes, to be able to understand how civilization works in its entirety. Sometimes the psychological appeal of the thumbnail might be related to awe on scale. So this is very weird. I built the biggest particle accelerator in Minecraft, but the composition of the thumbnail is very, very interesting. It definitely makes you stop and think, what is this? And this kind of looks cool. You'll see a lot of videos on YouTube that either have something amazing, they have something which is really, really big, or they have something which is really, really small. And all of those are interesting for different reasons. But not all videos necessarily have to be this high octane, high shock value kind of video. It just depends on the viewer intent as well. So sometimes if you're wanting to have a study with me video, this is a great video to study with me on a stormy day. That has 589,000 views in 1 month. This channel in general is just a very, very chilled channel. And I think for students who are in their exam period right now, that's gonna be great for their studies. Just expand on this thumbnail a little bit. You can see, compare the colors here. This is super red, super big, kind of jumping at you, very weird. Whereas this has a serif font, it's got a lot of white, muted colors. It just looks like a chill kind of thumbnail. So always think about the psychological appeal and how each element contributes to that psychological appeal as well. Talking about visuals, sometimes if you're trying to rope people along for a high production thing, you might actually try to go for a visual that looks like cinematic experience. This video is by Life of Reza, a fantastic YouTuber who makes kind of cinematic-y kind of vlogs. And this video is how to film yourself and look cinematic. So naturally, the thumbnail should match that as well. If it just had her in a t-shirt and some poor lighting, and you probably wouldn't perform as well. So overall, you want to suit the style to the content. Talking about another thing that makes banger thumbnails, you really want to consider all the visual elements of the thumbnail and how it creates that appeal. You might want to look at the composition, for example. This is a half-half composition here, or sort of half-half, and that's very interesting because these are often compositions that are useful for being like, this is the before and this is the after, and you've got this inbuilt story inside that thumbnail composition. You can go even further and subdivide it even more if you wanted to, from day 1 to day 30. The other thing I would say here is that the word day is an English word. You might want to avoid the word day potentially. Here it contributes a lot to the thumbnail, but it's going to maybe restrict just some people who are international from watching this video. But that's a small point. I mean, this video's got 2.1 million views anyway, so it doesn't really matter. This is a good one. This is a good one by Dream, very recent actually. Minecraft speedrunner versus Titan. And so here, the composition is very interesting because you've got Dream being literally maybe 10% of the height of the thumbnail. He's there in the bottom left corner. And then you've got this massive Titan, which is taking the rest of it, with a lot of kind of sky / negative space around it. So that sort of depth is very interesting to look at. I think people can play around with angles and depth a lot more on YouTube than they currently do. So that's an avenue that you might want to explore for your thumbnails as well. So those are a few points about composition. I would say that you want to try to have maximum 3 elements of, meaning there. It's just that you want to try to make your thumbnails not too confusing, because the longer it takes someone to process a thumbnail, then the less likely they are going to click on your video. You want people to pretty much understand it instantly, or if not understand it instantly, then be able to get a feeling from it instantly. And that's very hard to do if you've got lots and lots and lots of different things in your thumbnail. Now, when I say elements, I think it's important to get the definition of that kind of right. For example, an element, let's say you have 100 books, right? That doesn't mean that you have 100 elements. Really, a pile of books is just one element. So you just want to really try to get at this point of, I want this thumbnail to be easy to understand so that people can drive the interest and then feel intrigued by it. It doesn't have to be completely understandable, because you also want to create a curiosity gap. So sometimes it's good to kind of confuse people, but you don't want them to be confused by what's going on. You want them to be curious about what's going to happen, if that makes sense. The next point about thumbnails is to make it big enough for mobile screens. Now, a huge portion of traffic is still on mobile. These days, a lot of traffic is actually moving to TV now, but you still want the main element to be big, just in case someone's got a tiny mobile and they can't really see much there. Okay, so you've got a few ideas for composition down. Hooray! Now you want to try to think about the next most important thing, and this is very, very critical to get right, and that is color.
I'm going to include a color wheel here just because it'll help you to understand some of the concepts that I'm about to talk about. Not everyone actually knows that the colors and the placement of where they are on the wheel helps you a lot in terms of being able to design things. So the first thing that you want to understand is color blocking. Basically, by having these big blocks of color, it helps you to direct your eyes towards the other thing that's not that block of color. You'll notice here, for example, there's a lot of blue, and the blue everywhere else in the thumbnail helps to direct your attention towards the non-blue things that stand out. In this particular case, it'll be his face, which is kind of more on the yellow orangey side of the color wheel here, or it might even be the red there from the 1-star review. Your next question might be, well, okay, like, that's kind of cool. Color blocking is just having big swaths of color, but how do you even choose what colors to put in those colors? And this is where the color wheel comes in very, very handy, because there is a thing which will blow your mind if you haven't heard of it before, but it's this idea of complementary colors. Complementary colors are basically, when you look at this color wheel, the ones that are on opposite sides of the color wheel will contrast more with that thing kind of nicely. So here you can see that red is the opposite, or kind of on the other side of the color wheel from blue, which makes red stand out against the blue. And then similarly here, the yellow kind of his hair and stuff also stands out against that blue for the same reason. So that's why red and yellow are really, really good options in terms of colors for contrast against this blue here. He's got a bit of purple there, and the purple is kind of more on the side of the blue. So that means that the purple, or even if he was to use some of the other blues, they would kind of blend into each other a little bit more. And finally, think about negative space. Negative space is just, the space where there's nothing, that helps to give more focus to the space where there is actual stuff. The next point I want to talk about is this kind of idea of skeuomorphism. Now, we don't use that word very often these days, but when iPhones first came out, people needed a way to understand what different apps did, because the concept of apps, it might sound unbelievable, but a few years ago the concept of apps was a completely new concept. No one knew what apps were, no one knew what apps did, and it's mind-blowing to think that that's the case. But the way that Steve Jobs thought about introducing iPhones and apps to the world was to go for skeuomorphism. Now, YouTube, for example, was a literal picture of a TV, and then the Notes app was, actual notes. The videos were a video icon, the clocks were a clock thing, and even if you looked at the different app designs, they took lots of inspiration from real objects and how real objects would kind of look to give you an idea of how your thing would look. Even your contacts calendar was kind of like a Rolodex, which is not something that a lot of people have these days. To bring all this back to YouTube, what does this have to do with YouTube at all? I think that skeuomorphic design can be useful for YouTube thumbnails, in that if you're trying to create a video that's like something or themed on something, then you want to try to demonstrate things that kind of fit that theme. Here is I survived 50 hours in the Apple Vision Pro. It feels Apple-y. And it's not just the device itself, which is iconically Apple, but also something that not a lot of people would necessarily recognize. However, this text on the pop-up, the font color of the pop-up actually matches that you would see in an iPhone. Even the background is kind of this whitish thing which we've come to associate with Apple. Kind of amazing that a company has managed to associate itself with the color white, but Apple has done it. There's, of course, many, many more visual elements for thumbnails that I haven't talked about, stuff like leading lines or lighting or whatever, but we need to move on, because I want to give you now a concrete strategy for getting better at your own thumbnails that is universal, that anyone can use to make better thumbnails for their YouTube channel. To understand how to create better thumbnails, one way to think about it, and this is just for everything in general that you're creating in life, is to think about how creativity actually works. Creativity is not just us sitting down and brainstorming things like crazy and hoping that by some miracle something comes to our brain. Actually, it's something that can be more systematic, and it relies on inputs and processes, and those inputs and processes become your outputs. Some people are going to argue with this, but to create something is to combine inputs together and then merge them together in a different way to make an interesting output that's unique. So let's talk about inputs. When it comes to thumbnails, just having a big bank of inspiration is going to be really helpful and make it a lot easier for you to create thumbnails than trying to generate stuff in your head from scratch. What I tend to do is I tend to literally just collect screenshots of stuff that I see on YouTube, and I just screenshot it into my iPhone. These days, smartphones give you the capability to actually search text in your Photos app, for example, on iPhone, or in Google Photos. You can also do that too, I'm pretty sure. So this is a really low effort way to just save thumbnails that seem to be doing well on other people's channels, and you can keep a small bank like that. Of course, the smarter thing to do would be to put that in your own note-taking app. But sometimes you're just a bit lazy and you don't want to put it in your note-taking app. So look, anything that you're doing to save the things that you're seeing is going to be really great. I also tend to share thumbnails with YouTuber friends because I find that that's really useful. It can prompt interesting discussions about why thumbnails did successfully or not successfully, and it helps you to get a bit more surface area for that thumbnail, because having a discussion about something lets it stick in your mind more. It's also a kind of cool motivation to be like, hey, guys, look at this cool thumbnail that I checked out. It's like stocks, but for thumbnails. But if you are, gonna do this properly, I guess, then collecting in the software, maybe collecting in Notion, for example, is a really good thing to do. I've talked about the idea of collection, but your question might be, okay, so how do I collect these thumbnails exactly? Well, you can sometimes just do a simple search on YouTube for that, and search for whatever your topic is that you're about to create a video for, put it into YouTube and see what pops out. You can also use 1 of 10. You can also use view stats. Both are fantastic tools for that. But the key is just to get more thumbnails. Now, I want to share with you a quick secret strategy that I have not put into the slides, but sometimes what YouTube strategists will do, or smart YouTubers will do, is they're going to enter a new niche, for example. They will create a new Google account and then just look at videos that relate to that particular niche. Maybe it's golf, for example. And then that way they can use their YouTube feed of that fake account that they've made to just receive videos that would be recommended to them as that golf person. So if you're wanting to try out organic discovery like that, that can be a way to find out new videos, and you just collect those as well. Now that you've collected this super duper bank of thumbnails, you want to kind of analyze why are they successful. And a lot of the reasons why they're successful, I won't go through again because we actually talked about, how to make a good thumbnail just in the previous section. Think about the visuals, thinking about the psychological appeal. Just use all those tools, but use them as analysis tools instead to see what other people are doing to make their thumbnails get millions of views. Now, here you might think, well, we're already at outputs, but I don't feel like I've really made a good thumbnail yet. How do we get to actually making the thumbnail? And what I would advise is to scrap the output section and then change that into rough outputs, because putting it onto a piece of paper and then physically looking at it is very, very different, because it really gives you a stronger idea as to the feeling of a particular thumbnail. Now, some huge creators, we're talking the people that have 1 million, 10 million, 100 million subs, they will sometimes have teams of people that just help them ideate and sketch out different thumbnails before they go and make a more finalized thumbnail. So it's really important to have those rough outputs because they help you to direct your polished outputs. And so that's why I think sketching is really cool as a part of that process. This is the sketch that I did for this video. I literally, I was on the bus, so I was like, I want to make the thumbnail for this video. And look, I don't know if this is going to be the actual thumbnail that I end up using. I know this isn't, but you can see that some ideas are there. There's me in the middle there, conceptually speaking. There's a whole bunch of stuff flying around me in a kind of spiral, because I wanted this video to be very, very information dense, and I wanted to present that there's a lot of information in this video, which there is. There's actually about 230 slides worth, which is absolutely bonkers. And to demonstrate that there's a lot of information, I just wanted to demonstrate a lot of different cards around me. So if the video's thumbnail comes out kind of like this, then that's great. If it doesn't turn out to be this one, then it means I've A/B tested it and some other thumbnails performing better. As I said, the focuses for your sketches are going to be on composition, including where are people physically looking on the thumbnail. It's to have a rough idea of color. Here I've made some very, very rudimentary colors there to make it rainbow-ish. And then finally, that psychological appeal thing that I keep on talking about, because understanding humans, turns out It's very useful for understanding how to get views on on YouTube. Okay, so now you've got this input, you've got the processes, you've got your rough outputs, and then finally you need your polished outputs, which is just going to be your final thumbnail. Although I'm not going to talk about that too much, about the specifics of how to do that, because there's a lot of things that you just need to learn in Photoshop or a vector design software like Sketch or Adobe Illustrator to be able to do that. But hopefully from the YouTube strategy perspective, specifically, this has given you a lot of insight into how to make a really, really good thumbnail. Now, the thumbnail is the start of the viewer experience. And so because this is a start, it's also part of the story. And I think that's really important to understand. But there is one other part that you want to get right before you go into the story, which is the title that goes with that thumbnail. So I'm going to be talking about the scroll stopper framework for creating killer titles. Man, we really patented a lot of these frameworks, didn't we?